Hello. Welcome to tonight's bedtime story by Lucid Tales. I hope your day has held you gently in the palm of its hand. But whether it has been soft waves or riptides for you, it's time to relax now. Find somewhere comfortable, maybe your bed or a favourite armchair, and make sure you're ready for sleep. Don't forget to brush your teeth. Take your shoes off if you can, and feel the freedom in your toes, the little loosening that means it's time for bed. Tonight's story is about Selkies and the terrible theft a man committed. Once, when folk were wiser and felt the land around them in their bones, saw it with their hands and not just with their eyes, they knew that the sea was full of creatures we did not understand, creatures that could change their form with the time and tide, tempt foolish landsmen into drowning in the sea's watery embrace. One of these creatures was the Selkie. Selkies were fierce folk who took the form of the seal in the water, and when the tide changed could shed their seal skin to stand as men, women, and all manner of humans upon the shore. It was said that if you were bold and deceitful enough, crafty and cunning enough, if you found the seal skin of a Selkie while they walked in human form, you could trap the Selkie to do your bidding. This is the story of a wild, free Selkie and the cruel man who stole her skin. In the islands of Scotland, there was a fisherman who lived alone in a cold bed, and worked hard in the day on a cold sea, one of many. When the weather grew too fierce, he hunted for salvage on a cold shore, one of many, and whether his nets were full or limp with water, he would sell his cold catch in a cold market, one of many. One early morning, far earlier than even the bakers would wake, this cold man woke in a cold sweat, and saw that the sea was still rough after a great storm. And so he laid aside his sleep and his nets, and went to the shore to search for what treasures the sea might have flung up. He walked, but yet he found nothing. Far ahead on the beach he thought he saw someone, a pale shape shrouded by mist. So what? There were always folk searching for storm treasure. It was no crime to be up before the dawn and decent folk. He kept walking. After a time the mist thinned enough that he could see before him a beautiful woman, slender and brown, with long dark hair that tumbled like seaweed over her breast. Serene as a moonlit pond, the woman left light footprints in the sand and ran unclad under the sky. The cold man's cold heart burned with cold fire, and he wanted her. As he walked slowly, stealthily, closer, his feet caught on something and he nearly fell. And there on the sand he saw a strange shape, like a folded cloak. He went to touch it, and it slipped through his grasp like a whisper of wind, like something that shied away from his touch. He seized it and pulled it up to see. It was like a cloak, or some strange garment, made of seal hide. Then he knew what it was. The seal skin of a Selkie. He hastened away, folding and bundling it roughly beneath his own cloak, and made his way to the inn in the village where his friend was the landlord. He woke him with harsh knocking and begged a favour. "Hide this," he said, handing it to the landlord. "It must be kept hidden somewhere safe." And the landlord, though surly at this rough awakening so early, took it from the man's hands and hid it in the thatch of the roof where no one would find it. The fisherman made his way back to the beach, where he found again that beautiful woman, serene no longer. Now she ran from one end of the beach to the other with those fleeting footsteps, searching desperately and keening and wailing in her eerie voice for her lost skin. "What is the matter?" the cold, pale man asked her, and she, rightly fearful, hid herself behind rocks, with her pulse fluttering in her brown throat. "I will not hurt you," he lied softly, and the Selkie knew it for a falsehood in her heart, but in her terror did not listen. "I have lost something precious," she said. "I will help you find it," the man replied. "But first let us find you some clothes. You must be frozen." And the Selkie, dazed with fear and shock of losing her skin, her soul's form, followed the man as pliant as a lamb. What else could she do? They returned to the beach once the man had dressed her in clothes to his liking, and had seen to it that she ate and drank and was delayed as much as possible. But though they searched all day and into the evening, the Selkie's skin was not found. And so the cold man invited the Selkie woman to his home for rest, and while she was there insisted upon a hot bath to warm her from the cold of the day and the shock of losing her precious something. She wilted in the hot water, and felt weak and faint from the steam as the man's cloying fingers gently brushed her hair clean of tangles and sand and the salt of her sea, her tears. They returned to the beach the next day, and did not find the skin, and again the next, until the fisherman declared that he must go to sea, catch fish, or else they should starve. Would the woman mind his home for him while he trawled the sea, just for one day? And so it went. Little by little the cold man ate up what made the Selkie, as a worm eats the heart of an apple. And in time, of course, they were married, for village folk do not take kindly to strange women with voices like the cry of a gull and hair like tangled seaweed who live unmarried with men. Of course, as these things go, the cold man grew fat on the Selkie's starvation, and when she guttered like an empty oil lamp, he gave her barely enough oil to continue burning. She knew, suspected, that he was the one who had stolen her skin. But there was no escape without it, and so she was forced to hide that screaming knowledge in her heart and be a pliant and loving wife, one of many. In time, though she was loath to do so, the Selkie bore 2 children, a son and a daughter, and loved them dearly. Another string tied the wild, free Selkie to the cold man's web. The 2 children spent much of their time with their mother, for their father was gone at sea most days, and the other children were cruel to them for their deep, dark eyes and brown skin and hair like tangled seaweed. They saw how he shouted and raged at her when the fishing was poor, how she cowered in fear when against any other man she stood like an oak, how he charmed her afterward and whispered sweet, idle untruths before the axe descended again. They heard her weeping in the night, her lonely cries on the beach when they followed her to see where she disappeared to so often. They saw the seals' heads bobbing out on the sea, and gazing at her as she gazed back, felt that the longing in the 2 of them to dive in among them still lived in their mother too. In time, they learned the story of how their cold father had trapped their wild mother, and grew sick at the sight of him. He saw them shrinking away, and raged even more. The 2 children searched high and low through the fisherman's cottage, and could find neither hide nor hair of their mother's skin. But the cold fisherman grew no warmer, and the cruel village children no kinder, nor their mother any less sad and pale. And so they searched wider, through every cave on the shore and every hidden place they knew, until one day the daughter of the Selkie, sent to fetch her father home from the inn, chanced to hear the cold man and the landlord laughing within about a morning when he had pounded on the inn door like the devil's hounds were on his tail, before even the grey light of dawn had risen, and how he had bundled a strange scrap of fabric into the landlord's arms before disappearing back to the beach and returning with a wife. The daughter's heart fluttered in her chest, and she stood frozen outside the door. Making her way around to the kitchen door, she slipped in and up the stairs, and all the way up to the thatched roof, where she began to feel an itching, like a tightness loosening under her skin. She followed the strange sensation all the way to the furthest corner, where she saw something like a scrap of fabric hanging from behind a rafter. She snatched it up, that strange, soft skin, and the scent of it nearly broke her heart. It smelt like her mother, that rich, warm scent that to her meant love. But it smelt also of the sea, to which her mother would return, perhaps leaving the girl and her brother all alone. The girl hesitated, torn between her desire to free her mother and her need for her mother. But, as all children will, she gripped the skin hard in her small hands and ran. On the way, she met her brother, sent to bring both her and her father home, and showed him the skin. He turned back and ran alongside her. They fled back to the cottage by the sea as though their father were breathing fire down their necks, and burst in to where their mother was stirring soup, singing the strange songs of the Selkies where the cold man could not hear. The Selkie looked up, her soup and song forgotten in the yearning of her body toward that skin, her skin. Her two children looked up at her, her soul in their hands and her heart in their hearts. They held out the soft, fine skin and offered it freely to her, her children. And so, when the cold fisherman came home that night, full of beer and rum, he did not expect the cold welcome that awaited him. The hearth empty, the embers as ash, the soup spilled on the floor. He did not expect the black rough-spun sack, or the knife. He did not expect the sickening fall and the water in his lungs. He did not expect. Such is the fate awaiting the cold men. It is said that Selkies still roam the coasts of the north, and that sometimes their skins may still be found on the beaches, but we all know what those who would steal those skins and so ensnare a wildling deserve. Don't we? Good night. Sleep well. And I'll see you tomorrow for another bedtime story.